everything you've learned. So please, put your hands together for Mr. Greg Anderson.
How about Ryan? I love the lighthouse and the tugboat analogy. It's super beautiful. Both shine, both do the same thing, both save the same types of boats, but one's job is just to shine. How powerful is he? Give it back up for Ryan. So, you kind of stole my thunder a little bit already outlining what we're going to be talking about, but it's a great introduction. So, you guys, my name is Greg Anderson. I'm the CEO of a company called Jedari here that's locally. We'll touch on that a little bit here in a little while. I've also built 88 different software platforms, flipped over 1,000 pieces of property. Those are like deeds in hand that we still own, flipped. Let's think. What else have we got here? Been an entrepreneur for 20 years. My systems, my software solutions, between digital content and the coaching that people sold $1 in sales. Yeah, it's a lot. We have some experience. I've been executive producer of 2 different films. I don't know how I got invited to do that. They just said, hey, you have the right kind of mindset. I'm an architect by trade. Would you take our books and turn them into films? And we did that just as a side project, which was pretty fun. I'm a published author, and then, 3 years in the jungle. So in order to move us into the next piece, I want to set some framework. They always say that a great story has a beginning, it has a middle, and it has an end. There's all of this trauma and drama that goes all through it, but I'd like to just drop you right into the middle of the thick of it. Is that okay? Awesome. Now, to do this, I get to set one piece of framework. Every person in this room, every person on this planet, we have something in common. When we were born, we knew nothing. Our bodies came out. We could breathe, we could operate, could use the bathroom, couldn't really walk, we couldn't talk, we didn't know how to hunt, we didn't know how to eat, we didn't know how to think, we didn't know mathematics. So everything that we know, we were programmed with. Depending on your society, depending on your parents, depending on your church, your society, whomever that it is that you learned from, you were programmed as a human. That's why a lot of people just say, oh, I say these things because it's just the way that it is. Or I say these things because I sound like my mom or my dad. You were programmed with that. So my programming was that I grew up in a broke family. That meant broke emotionally, broke physically, and broke financially. So I didn't have a lot of trainings to teach me how to be successful, even though I thought that I really wanted to do that. So what happened was I was trained by MTV. This is what my life turned into be. That was my 15-person Range Rover limousine. This was the parties that I would create and craft so that I could feel successful and loved. Because if you thought I was successful, then somebody else thought I was successful because I didn't. But I didn't know this. I was programmed in a way to believe that if I partied like MTV, if I threw the things, if Vegas would call me and say, hey, can you bring your crew down to Vegas this weekend and I'll comp you X amount for your tables, just bring all your friends. And it happened pretty consistent. I thought this was awesome. And in truth, it was pretty fun. But I ended up living what I call a 95% 5 life. 95% of everything I felt really good about. 5% was like, that's a little shady. I'm not really quite sure about that little bit. But 95 is good enough. Like most people live a 60% life. I live a 95% life. 95 of everything. 95 of my fitness, 95% of my relationships, 95% of my businesses. 5% was a little shady. So I learned something. Sedation was the key to my life. Sedation through making money, sedation through your houses, sedation through your cars, sedation through your friends, what people saw about you. I love this quote that really just says, the harder I work, the luckier I get. And what that meant was the harder I work, the more I sedated everything else in life. And then it just seemed like everything else was great. But it really wasn't. It was this 5% that I was hunting for. And I think about this quite often because, you guys have seen those images of the iceberg, and the tip of the iceberg is outside of it, and that's 5%, and then 95% is below. Well, I thought, wow, I'm only 5% off. Like 5%. When I figured that out until one day, after dropping us into the middle of this kind of lifestyle took me to about 7 years ago. And in the midst of that, I'd started learning meditation and created men's personal development groups and other personal development groups. I'd lived with monks. I'd stayed in Italy and studied in these hidden and underground temples. I did all kinds of interesting spiritual type of pieces. I played with psychedelics and all the things. And one day, I get hit with this thought, I thought 95% underwater, 5% left to fix. But what if it was upside down? What if 95% was wrong, because that 5% was me? And that other 95% was just the world around me. So this kind of hit me pretty hard. And I'd been studying neuroscience and subconscious programming and subconscious reprogramming. And those are the ability to take a look at a thought and say, do I really believe this? The thing that's about to come out of my mouth, the way that I get triggered when somebody talks to me, is that me speaking or is that the programming from my upbringing? And so one day, I'm walking in my house, and I walk into my closet, which is this large, expansive closet with all kinds of things. And there's a whole rack, probably 100 to 200 t-shirts, because I don't know why I needed them, I just had them. And I touched one. And when I touched it, it gave me a memory of an experience I had with, a former, a girlfriend, or a concert or something, and that hit me that something so small like a shirt in my closet, that when I touched it, it brought me back to an experience. And could I actually move forward if I have everything in my life reminding me of the past? So I went through my closet, and I started touching it, going, hey, do you remind me of something? And everything that reminded me of something, I actually just took on, threw on the ground, and got ready to donate it. And I felt really good about this experience until I walked out into my house, the rest of the house, and took a look at the paintings on the wall and the couches, and realized I hadn't picked any of this stuff. It was either from a former spouse, or when I got divorced, then it was from an interior decorator. And all the things around me reminded me of experiences that I no longer was a part of. But I just had it because it was my stuff. That's what you're supposed to do, right? You just collect stuff. So I started getting rid of things. I got rid of first the closet and the clothes, and then I started getting rid of things like furniture, bedroom furniture. Then I started getting rid of cars. And I started getting rid of all the knickknacks in the house. And I got to this place where I'm like, wow, I almost have nothing left. What am I going to do? But I still had me. I'm still the 95%. There's still internal work that I wanted to do. So I made a choice. And that choice was, I was going to get rid of everything. I kept this car, 12 boxes, and I was going to move and go nomadic. I didn't know where in the world at first I was going to go. I didn't know where I would go, who to talk to. I wasn't following a plan or a program. But at the same time, luckily enough, I started having all of these visions and dreams about the Mayans. One pyramid in particular in Mexico called Chichen Itza. It's pretty famous. I kept seeing it everywhere. Seeing it on billboards and ads, and I'm like, well, hell, I'm just going to Mexico. So I sold all the things, packed everything in that storage unit, from all the things to just this. Important things, a bunch of guns, a car, the things that are important. You just kept those. And left. I flew into Cancun, did my first stint in Chichen Itza, and I spent the next 30 days in the car. And the next 30 days took me from the Yucatan, which is down at the bottom of Mexico, all the way back up to Mexico City. This trip up and back took me 30 days in a car. And I would stop, and I would go learn from a civilization, or learn from a group of people, or I would just go meditate on their pyramids. I'd never really understood how powerful meditation was, even though I had been trained on it from all these different experiences until I was gone. And so I did this. I went all the way up. I went to the Anthropology Museum, Teotihuacan, and just lived in these places. And when I got back to Mexico, or got back down into the Yucatan, I had already pre-planned something. My former spouse, her husband, and our 2 kids, they were going to fly down to Mexico. We were going to do our first family vacation. Because I had a family, I'm like, guys, I really feel drawn. I have to go. Will you support me? They're like, yeah, whatever you need. If you really feel like you need to go, go. So I met him in Tulum, came down, had a great vacation, great time, and they asked me, what are you going to do next? I said, I don't think I can go home. I'm going to stay. I still don't know the language. I still don't know the people here, but there's this calling that I have to stay. And here was the reason. When I left Utah, when I left the stuff, I could feel all of those invisible entanglements that we have, the belief systems that we were given, the things about, hey, you need to look a certain way, you need to act a certain way, you have to have a certain amount of money, you have to have these things in order to feel love, because I didn't. But those things started falling off because the rest of our society wasn't touching me anymore. I was down there. I was going to figure something out for myself. And so I talked to them and said, okay, guys, here's what I'm going to do. Every 5 weeks, I'm going to fly back out from Mexico. I'll fly back into Utah. We'll rent a house. I'll bring the two kids over, and you'll stay with me for a week, and then I'll go back down. And that lasted once. The next time I flew home, I stayed in their house. It was Christmas Eve. My daughter said, hey, would you mind just staying with us for Christmas? And I'm like, that feels weird. I'm going to go stay with my former and her husband and our kids in their house? Oh, it's Christmas Eve. I'll do it. And so we did it. And for the next 3 years, that's what I did. I would come home. I would live with them, do dad things. I had more time with them than I ever had before as a single dad. I lived about 30 miles away previous to. And so I had this experience where I could come back in and be family and then come back out and have all kinds of really interesting, crazy experiences. And one of them in particular, I ran into this woman who was a Native American grandmother who was trained Hindu. And I was raised Mormon. I studied Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, Judaism, just name it. All the spiritual books and all the spiritual religions I could find, I was pulling in and taking the things that worked for me and letting everything go. It wasn't about finding truth in one thing. It was about finding truth in all things. It's almost like this whole experience, this rogue world, you could call it rogue esoteric world. Esoteric meaning hidden knowledge. Every speaker up here, even you guys, have a message to share of something that you found somewhere. So that's what this was all about, was finding this and cultivating this information. And anyway, this Native American grandmother says, Greg, I'm going to teach you something that's going to help you about 10 years speed your journey. But you're going to do it while you're down there. I said, great. What is it? She goes, well, first you have to make me 3 agreements. I'm like, perfect. What are they? She said, well, number 1, you can't cut your hair for 3 years. I'm like, my hair? Like, yeah, nothing on your head. You can't grow it for 2 years or 3 years. I'm like, interesting. Okay, I can do that. I've always been clean cut. I've always been told what to look like based on society's rules and the ones I set on myself. I'll do that. Number 2, no drugs, no alcohol, no food that has any kind of antibiotic in it, nothing, no plant medicine, nothing for 3 years. You're going to learn how to just be you. You're going to learn what your food addictions are. You're going to learn how your coping mechanisms work. That's it. And number 3, no sex of any kind for 3 years. No self, no other people. You're just going to be you for 3 years. I said, okay, great. I think I can do this. Made the commitment, actually walked through it, and it was really great. Like, I did the whole experience, and I learned so much about myself, about triggers that I had by living this MTV life, being taught about how a man and a woman should operate. That if you're in a room with a beautiful woman, you need to act a certain way or wonder, what these weird constraints are versus just being present to have a really great conversation. So that's all it needs to be. I didn't know that until I went through this. Growing my hair gave me this really epic experience, which was I had never known what it was like to be wild. I was really like tight box, knit. I had to look a certain way. Again, I had to make a certain amount of money, and that all was falling apart. And so what happens after the 3 years, well, I guess during it, this was it. I got to live one of my fantasies like Indiana Jones. I would go into temple complexes that had very few people that had been in there in amounts of time. I would hire a local family. I would go stay with them. Sometimes like deep jungle. Sometimes it was, pretty poor conditions. And other times I had a small apartment outside of Tulum that I would come back and integrate with. And I was working through these experiences. And at one point in time before I came, I was finding out that I had a lot of purpose that was outside of me. There was a lot of experiences in going out and doing other service works that had nothing to do with showing you my image, trying to be cool by telling you I'm doing good things. It had nothing to do with anything to do with myself. I would just get called, sometimes by Native American tribes, well, here in the US, sometimes tribes in other places, sometimes tribes in other countries. They would call me and ask me to come do something, and so I would fly there and go do that support. And I found that I got a lot of power from being able to just free myself and go, and I had, again, no constraints about what you thought of me My whole life was built around what you guys thought of me. I thought that. You probably didn't know that because you didn't know me before, but in general in life, my self-worth was given by what other people thought. Because I didn't think that I was worth all of those components. I didn't think I was worth the love and all of the experiences. But these things allowed to teach me this. And one of the most impactful things that I had is, this was like long-haired Greg. This is my Jesus hair days. 3 years out, by the time I was done, I was meditating 14 hours a day, one style. And I was learning how to sift through all of the thoughts that weren't mine that made me act or think a certain way. And when I came home, the first thing that I did was go back to meditating for 14 hours a day. I couldn't handle the society. I couldn't handle being outside with all kinds of people. There was just too much going on. And society, like credit scores and monetary policies and all of these things, are really designed to make you act a certain way. And I was like, no, I'm going to be like Neo in the Matrix. I'm not going to get connected to all of those things. And so I spent a really solid amount of time not working barely, meditating, and just like trying to integrate and find this new part of myself. And what I found over this whole experience is the prize was, as I went from this guy that owned his own companies, that did well at that point in time, still overstressed, still couldn't move past where I was. I was stuck in this position for about 5 years. You know, I made a few $100,000 a year net a year. That was great. But I couldn't grow past that. I had no capacity. I had so many limitations that were set on myself that I couldn't move. Sometimes I couldn't even breathe. It was just all self-sabotage. And so one of the things that I got out of all of the experiences is that once I stopped believing in limitations, then I released myself from all limitations. You do an experience for the experience, not just trying to reach the next level. Because if I'm always trying to push to the next level, then most of the time I would lower my expectations for what I believe versus just being present and doing the best you possibly can. And then everything has flowed so much stronger than this. I have really beautiful businesses. I'm the CTO of Lions Not Sheep. I'm a co-founder of Jedari, which is a software platform that launches communities, people that have communities that they talk to, right? They have tribes of people, they have coaching companies, they have musicians that want to have their fan clubs run on their own technology. We built the technologies for them so that they can pull off of most social media networks. And they can control their narrative and control their conversation and control their money, since they can charge for all of these accesses. Beautiful friends, beautiful business partners, beautiful relationships, and really have been able to cultivate a place where our whole life now is about helping people with messages. I don't do marketing. I'm a tech guy, but I'm the best tech guy, best tech partner anybody will ever have. Because all of our stuff is designed for this. Rogue Syndicate is launched on the product. A couple of the other speakers that are in here as well have their own iOS, Android applications, their platforms with us. But it was this ability to remove from all limitations that allowed me to get into this place. And when I look at this, I think we really have two options, and I'll leave you guys with this. The two options are this. You can remain asleep. You can remain programmed by your society, by your schools, or you can really take accountability for everything that's ever happened. You can analyze everything that's ever happened, and you can look inside to find that real purpose, that real meaning to you. Guys, I really love this quote that I've been talking for a few years, which is, I don't share my thoughts because I think it will change the minds of people that think differently. I share my thoughts to show people who already think like me that they're not alone. And I know every one of you guys have a message to share with somebody who thinks that they're alone right now, and they don't need to be. If you're only willing to stand up, do something different, find your own path, find your own purpose, and speak, and just start showing up into the world in beautiful and strong places. So I appreciate you guys. My name is Greg Anderson. Thank you, Dusky, for allowing me to get on here and share.
Greg Anderson, huh?
Dude,
Fascinating.
thank you.
I'm listening to it, and I hear you talking about getting rid of your stuff before you leave. And I was getting stressed sitting over there.
Good.
Was I the only one? Like, did you envision going, no, my stuff. Like, it's all just stuff.
Right.
So I'm curious, at that point, what were you most stressed about giving away as you were just selling it or donating it? And you had some beautiful cars.
I did. I did. You know, it wasn't a thing. It was that I kept getting into this place that said, if I take one more step, if I donate one more thing, if I get rid of one more thing, if I do another experience, I won't ever come back. The Greg that was there, that was showing up, never did come home, right? He was changed, he's gone, he's dead someplace else. But it was that thought that I was really scared that if I did something, then I would lose my self-identity. And one of the most important and impactful things I didn't mention, but it was up here on a slide, is that I learned that the more that I forgot, the more that I remembered. Write it down. The more that I forgot, the more that I remembered, which means this. The more that I forgot about how everybody else told me I needed to be, the more I remembered who I was.
Wow. Taking away what everyone puts on you to find out
Absolutely.
who you truly are.
Yeah, we're born, we're trained. The moment that you're like, oh, cool, I'm just a trained automaton robot, then I can change my own programming pretty fast.
Yeah. Man, I'm going to think about that for a long time. Greg Anderson, everyone.
Thank you.
Nice job. Wow. All right, let's keep going. So let me tell you about our next speaker, Beth Clifford. Beth is an accomplished professional with 8 years of experience in medical aesthetics, leading a team of 8 sales consultants responsible for growing and consulting over 5,000 medical practices. She's a 4-time President's Club winner, and as an entrepreneur, she founded the Elevate 365 podcast to inspire others to reach their full potential